Hello. So today JustFlight have updated the F28, the Fokker Fellowship in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So I thought we might take it for a fly. If we go and have a look at Little Nav Map, we are going to fly from Ramona over to Big Bear City. The only reason I've chosen this flight, I chose somewhere down here based on the distance away from Big Bear, but I actually spotted Big Bear City first on the map. It's a visual approach. There is a localiser, but it's very much a visual approach, and it looks like a really interesting kind of place to approach that's surrounded by hills. So we're just going to go and check the wind to make sure it's still looking good. So wind is from 110. Oh, it's right on the borderline. We're going to have a little bit of a tailwind on the way in, but it should be okay still. So we're going to come into Big Bear City. We're departing from Ramona, and to deal with the wind, we've got on departure 220 degrees 9 knots. So the wind has swung around a little bit over the last hour or so. So we'll be taking off runway 27, and we'll be flying out and then do a right turn and come back towards the track out towards VOR, and we'll be flying VOR to VOR along the route. So it should be pretty interesting. Okay, so back to the F28. Let's go and jump inside out of the noise. There's vans being very busy driving around in circles. I think they might be doing some donuts in a minute. I have no idea. Anyway, I've checked the flight controls already. They're looking good, so we should be able to go straight through the startup procedure. I'm using the notes I wrote when the F28 first came out, so this would be a good check actually to see if they still apply correctly to the aircraft. I've had a look through the change list for all the the updates to the aircraft. There's nothing specific. It's more around accuracy, around edge cases with various instruments around the aircraft, so nothing obvious that we need to take account of. Okay, so first things first, overhead we go and turn the battery on. That gives us some power around the aircraft, and then we go further overhead with controller 9, and we go to the APU section, which is here, and we turn the main APU switch to on. Then we go to air conditioning and we turn the left switch to on. And then back over on the APU section, we are going to wait 10 seconds from when we switched main, which is probably already happened by the time I finish talking, and we can hit the start button. And the APU will start firing up, and you'll see that happen on the dials directly above. So when the RPM gets up to 100, we'll be good. While we're waiting for that, we're just going to have a look at the checklist. So as soon as that happens, which it already has, so it's got to 100 and the turbine gas temperature is dropping. So we can switch Gen 3 to on, which we do by dragging it forwards, and then bleed air to on, and you can see all the valves open up on the environmental control systems. So central pedestal next, control 7 takes us down here, and we turn on the master radio switches. Next we go back overhead, control 8, and we go to the emergency exit lights at the bottom left, and we arm them. So we just roll the mouse wheel on the switch to move it forwards. Windshield heating section, we're going to put them both on low. It's not a very warm day, so we're going to switch them on immediately. You can do it later in the process, and there are notes on that in the checklist. Cabin altitude, so that's the dial here. We are only going to fly to 14,000 feet today, so we don't actually need to set the cabin altitude. Eyebrow panel in the middle, no smoking, and seatbelt signs go to on. Then go down to the master control panel, control 2. Okay, so what do we need to do here? We need to go and turn both the nav1 and nav2 radios on. So you do that by turning the knob to DME on both of them. And then go to the flight director in the center, set it to heading mode. set the heading as required. So for our actual takeoff, we'll be looking, well, we'll do the turn by hand. So the first heading we'll be looking for will actually be 90 degrees. So let's get the heading bug pointing to 90 degrees on the HSI. So you can see the little marker down here on the edge. So we're going to move that round to 90 or east. Okay, so you can see, yeah, that should be about right. Set the pitch command to 10 degrees. So this is just a visual reference here. So it relates to this knob. We can move the flight director indicator on the attitude indicator up to the 10-degree line. If we zoom in so we can actually see what I've done there a little bit more accurately, I've just moved the center point of this up to the 10-degree pitch line. It'll make a lot more sense once all of the avionics are up and running properly. So then we need to, I'll press Control 2 again to bring us back over here. So on the course section we need to set the Nav1 and Nav2 courses as required. So if we go and have a look at this, our initial course will be 59 degrees over to this first waypoint, which is the Julian Vortex. So we'll set the Nav1 course to 59 degrees. And we'll set the frequency to 114.00. So 114.00. So we'll go upwards and then loop it round. There we go, 114.00. So if we go and have a look down here, this will already be reflecting that. Okay, so we're almost doubling back on ourselves, and we're 17.5 miles away, which roughly relates to what we can see there from the center point of the airfield is 17.6 miles away. So that's looking good. We can already switch Nav2 or tune Nav2 to the next VOR. So that would have been, if we right click on it, because there's several things stacked on top of each other in little nav map, 116.20 for the thermal VOR or Vortex, 116.20. Oh, and the course to that will be 25 degrees magnetic. So if we look over here, and we'll set 25 degrees. (11620) wasn't it? I'll just double check that, make sure we've got it right. 11620, yeah. So we'll be able to, at the moment we're using this selector buttons underneath to select Nav1, so we'll be using Nav1. Unlike the BAE 146, the F28 does not have a split mode, so whichever button you've got pressed up here, both HSIs are going to reflect, so you can't play games with watching one nav instrument while connected to another, if that makes sense. Okay, so we calibrate the altimeter, so I'll press B and you can see the needle just moved there. Press D to calibrate the gyro compasses if they've wandered at all, and they haven't. And then we're going to go and set our altitude for cruise. So there's an altitude pre-selector here. So we're going to set that to 14,000 feet. There we go. Excuse me. And then we're going to go back down to the center pedestal now. So Control 7. And we're going to go and turn the nav lights on. So the nav light switch is over here. And then we're going to go and turn the transponder to standby and turn it to, what's the term? The squawk mode to C. And now we're going to prepare for engine start. So we have to go to the tablet first. So let's go and have a look in the aircraft tab. So there are no chocks on the aircraft at the moment, which is good. All the doors appear to be closed, which is good as well. So Control 3 takes us over to the engine gauges, and I think doing the barometric pressure will do this automatically for you with the B key, so we don't have to do anything about the thrust index settings. It's looking good already there. So if we click on the takeoff card over here, and then refer over to here, you will see that the markers have moved on the indicated airspeed, and that will be reflected by the call-outs on the way down the runway. So center pedestal again, control 7, we've got the gust lock lever down here, we're going to drop it down so the control surfaces will actually move. We go to the anti-collision top and bottom switches now for the lights and turn them on. We press control 6 to see the front of this section, and we go and turn on the boost pumps. So that's one here, one here, one here and one here. And then we go back overhead, control and 9, and we turn the start master to on or up. Okay, so this is the start master switch for the engines. So, okay, left engine start. We turn the start selector to 2 or right. So all we have to do is flick this to the right. So did you hear the cabin environment control system die off then? That's because the pressure is being used now to spin up the engine. So once it goes past about 15%, we can advance the fuel valve for engine number 2 to start. And then once it gets to 50%, we can advance the fuel valve all the way forwards. So we just sit here and wait for a moment. If we go and step outside, you'll hear it's getting very noisy out here. So this engine is starting to pump. That's the APU exit, by the way, the exhaust. So here we go, look, this engine's starting to pump some heat out now. Okay, it's got to 50%, so we can advance the lever all the way forwards. And then overhead, it's interesting to look around by panning the camera sometimes to see where things are. So here's the master starter. We're going to do number 1 now instead. And we're going to watch its HP is above and RPM. So some people call it the HP gauge, some people call it the RPM gauge. So it's just gone through 15%. So we can advance the fuel valve to start for engine number 1. And we'll wait for it to get to 50%, and then we can advance it to open. So the forward position is called open. I don't know all of this off the top of my head, by the way. I'm just following my own notes where I wrote down the names of things. Okay, so here it comes to 50%, advance to open, and that engine's ready to go as well. So after engine start, we go back overhead. We turn the start master to off. Then we go Gen 3 can come off, which we can drag it down to do that. The air can come off, and the main APU switch can go off because we don't need the APU anymore. The engines are running there, providing power to the aircraft and the compressed air for the environment control system. So on the air conditioning system now, we can now go and switch on the right system as well. Okay, so now we go to, still on the overhead, we go to the engine anti-icing. So we go further down. So engine anti-icing is here. We're going to switch both systems to auto. Windshield heating, we'd already done that. Pitot and vane heating, we can flick both of those on, which is up, which is quite strange because most of the others around here are down. And then we can prepare for taxi. So back in the cockpit, we are going to move the flap lever to 18 degrees, which I believe is there. There we go. So if we just zoom in to have a look at that, there we go. So the lever is on 18, and you can monitor that as well over here in the cockpit. So the flaps have already moved, they're quite fast. Set the trim as required, typically 5 units nose up. So you can see here, yeah, we're about nearly 5, so let's just use the trim on the elevators to move it to 5. That's good. So Control 7 takes us back to the centre pedestal, and we want to zoom out slightly, scroll up, and we want the taxi light to on. So taxi light is here on the left side. So you have to click it twice or roll the mouse wheel on it to move it all the way forwards to be on and extended. And at this point we can taxi to the runway. So we come off the parking brake, we ease the throttles forwards, and we are rolling. So should we put the head tracking on at this point so we can have a look around? So I've purposely removed other traffic from the ground because it causes the sim to stutter. So we're going to get a nice smooth flight as a result of that. It's a shame really. Hopefully in the new version of Flight Sim that comes out next year they'll solve that and have some kind of threading programming to load assets in without affecting the main animation. Okay, so as we taxi out to the runway, I'm just going to turn off the head tracking. So what do we need to do? So down here in the cockpit we need to turn the damping on for the autopilot. We can go and turn the transponder to on now. So you can see we put it on standby earlier. So let's just have a quick look at that. If I press Control 7, so yeah, that is on. Let's make sure we don't go taxiing off across the grass while we're doing these things. This is why it pays to have a co-pilot. Landing lights need to go to on and extended. I'll wait until we pull up here at the holding point for the runway to do that. So I'm going to spin the nose round. Okay, parking brake on for a moment. So press Control 7. So landing lights, there's 3 switches for the primary power for them, and then you have to extend them with 3 switches to the right. So that's the landing lights on. Then we can also turn on the strobe lights now we're at the edge of the runway. And we can pan up slowly and go and turn on the weather radar as well. I don't think we're going to see much weather today, but we'll see. Okay, so we're more or less ready to go out onto the runway. So parking brake back off, easing the throttle open, pull out onto the runway. This isn't the longest runway in the world, so I'm actually going to see how much runway we can get. And I may hold it on the brakes when we open the throttles and wait for them to spool up. This is where, to be honest, head tracking comes into its own, because we can very easily look around the cockpit as we line up. Okay, so I'm going to hold it on the parking brake, or the toe brake, sorry.
Come through, please take your seats with you. Power set.
Okay, here we go. So I'm going to hold the centre line, climb out in a straight line for a little while under manual control.
80 knots.
There's quite a lot of crosswind.
Rotate.
About time. That was a bit close.
Positive climb. Gear up.
Gear up. So we're holding 10 degrees on the attitude indicator. Ooh, the sim has frozen. I'm just going to hold there for a moment. Oh my word. So that proves that the other aircraft had nothing to do with the sim freezing.
Flaps 11.
So flaps 11.
Flaps up.
Flaps up. So we're just going to maintain this course for a moment.
Set climb up.
So throttles can come back to about 95%, just on that. So let's begin our right turn. So let's get some head tracking going on. Don't want to pull up too steeply. Doing about 200 knots, which is absolutely fine. We'll just do this nice gentle sweeping turn. The scenery around here is incredible, I have to say. So we'll just keep this turn going. Just coming up through 4,700 feet. All we're looking to do at the moment is have the reciprocal of the runway direction. So we're turning towards the heading bug, remember, not the course direction, because we need to double back. If I show you the map quickly, you'll understand why. So if we zoom out here, we're looking to go this way to re-establish our course. Hopefully don't do that too steeply. So we're using the attitude indicator now, because obviously we can't see where we're going. Coming round towards the direction we want to be going. Turned out a little bit too steeply there, that's just not being used to the aeroplane. Okay, so shall we go and turn on the autopilot? So it's going to go for roll and pitch mode automatically. We'll go for heading mode. We were nearly on the right heading anyway. Now we can get rid of that pitch command now. So pitch command really does nothing to the autopilot. It's just a visual reference for us. We can see here that we're on the 10-degree climb out. And we'll remain at that. That's absolutely fine for our purposes. Now, to see here, we're coming back in towards the VOR. But we need to be using nav 11620, is that correct? No, 114 we want. Did I not tune that in, or I did the wrong one earlier, didn't I? That's why it doesn't reflect what we're hoping to see. So that's better. So once the course deviation indicator gets past that dot, we should be able to say go to beam mode. So yeah, the flight director's already turning us left. So it's going to go and slowly pull us into this course into the VOR, which is perfect. So let's go and put this onto 11620. So we tuned the wrong one in earlier. So just goes to show the easiest mistakes to make are often caught straight away just by checking things. Let's turn off the head tracking because it's annoying. So we've got 11 miles to run until we get to the VOR. We're still climbing, same sort of rate. We're losing a little bit of speed though. So what we might do is disengage the autopilot for a moment, just drop the nose and re-engage the autopilot, put beam mode back on, and by dropping the nose that little bit we'll recover a little bit of airspeed. So we're climbing about 1500 feet a minute, which is absolutely fine. Okay, so remember when we come through here, if we switch to nav 2, in fact the better way to do this would be to turn the heading bug. Go to heading mode, so we know we're going in the right direction. And what we'll do is press nav 2 now. So this will now reflect the next leg. But notice the distance measuring equipment here is measuring nav1. So you do get some indication that helps you. Obviously the needles here both show nav1 and nav2 as well. If we wanted to now, we could go to beam mode, and it's going to follow nav2 now, look, because it's within the first dot, nearest the course deviation indicator. So the aeroplane is starting to make that left turn to do the 25-degree track. We have to be careful. If we go right over the top of the VOR station, we can lose signal. We may see that happen. So in that case, it actually pays to have the heading ready, going the direction you want to be going. So let's see if we lose the signal. If we go too close to directly over it, we'll lose it. I think we're going to be good, look, we're off to one side. So we'll just let the aeroplane sort itself out, continue climbing. We've got to 14,000 feet already, look, so we are accelerating now. So we'll be looking to pull back the throttles to about 90% maybe. Is that still going to be accelerating? We might have to drop them even to 85%, we'll see. Yeah, it's still accelerating just. You see the needle is moving there. So I think past experience with this, you need somewhere between 85-87% throttle, something like that. Okay. Okay, so we're in beam mode. We're gone to height mode now because we're obviously at 14,000 feet, so we're just trundling along. So we've got 30 miles to run until the next VOR station, which is over here. The, what did we say it was called? Thermal. Yeah, of course, Vortex. I keep saying VOR station, they're not, they're Vortex stations. Okay, so the next one will be PSP, so 11550. So let's get that tuned in on nav1 but ahead of time. 11550. Okay, and the course we want to take to it is 306 degrees. So we need to spin the nav1 course round to 306. Okay, so we have a few minutes now to admire the scenery. So should we go and turn on head tracking and actually have a look outside? Whoa, that is quite the view, isn't it? What a beautiful part of the world. Absolutely amazing. I'll say nothing about the co-pilot. Let's just go and skid over him and have a look. Yeah, it's a bit cloudy out this side. Can't really see very much. But we're on live weather, which always makes it more interesting. But this side we can see a bit more. Absolutely amazing. You never can tell what you're going to see in the simulator, can you? Okay, let's focus on what we're doing. So we've got 20 miles to run, or just under, until we get to the next waypoint. You can see us thundering along. So then we will turn. So let's have a look at this airfield, Big Bear City. It's at 6,700 feet. So looking at the map here, we probably want to be about 2,000 feet above that by the time we get to here. So maybe 9,500 feet at Carco would make sense, 10,000 feet, and then begin the descent in. So we want to be less than 250 knots, ideally about 200 knots and 9.5 to 10,000 feet at Okako. It's going to be a visual approach. I mean, it does have a localiser, but it's not going to help us very much. So we need to drop from 14,000 feet down to about 10,000 feet for Okako. So we'll see how high this looks on the way in. So just looking here, the 10,000 line is this grey line. It's not looking too bad, is it? Okay. How are we doing on speed then? So we're just above 250 knots. And we've got 10 miles to run. So now what we could do, we've got the heading bug aligned. We can go to heading mode, or we can switch over to nav 1 already. So this will flick round to represent what we tuned in earlier for the next leg. So it's almost a 90-degree bend look that we're coming up to. So we could help the aeroplane out here and start turning the bend for it. So we can go to beam mode, and notice if you are outside of that first dot, it won't start turning, so we'll help the aeroplane make the turn. Yeah, so we're starting the turn early. Yeah, see that happening? So we're putting ourselves on the intercept course, and we'll let then, obviously by the time we then get near the course, when the CDI or course deviation indicator sweeps in, it will turn the rest of the way automatically, because it will switch from heading mode to beam mode as soon as that gets in past the nearest dot. Oh, I just clicked. That's fine. You have to be so careful using the mouse in the cockpit that you don't click on things unintentionally. So I have of course left the landing lights on by mistake. I should have turned these off when we went through 10,000 feet. I think the damage is done now. We'll just leave them on for the rest of the flight. I'm sure somebody would have pulled me up for it in the comments. It does look incredible, doesn't it, out here? So you can see the aircraft has taken over. Look, it's switched over to beam mode because it got close to the track, and it's taking over doing it itself. So there you can see the point it took over. So when we leave PSP, we want to leave on a track of 331 degrees. So let's get the heading mode ready to do that. So we want 331, which is going to be about there. Okay. So what we'll do is when we get to 0, or close to 0, within a mile of the VOR, we'll switch to heading mode, and we'll begin descending as well. So we want to get back down to 10,000 feet, remember, by the time we get to Okako. So we'll go heading mode immediately and then switch the course. So 10 miles to run. You can see we're closing in on the vortex station. So we may use the spoilers as we descend to keep the speed under control. We could also play, we haven't looked at all at using indicated airspeed mode, so let's try it. If we were to put this at 180 knots, for example, or 200, let's try it. And we maybe will have a play with IAS mode on the way down. So 6 miles to run. We know we're turning right, so we'll just switch to heading mode, which will make the aeroplane turn right as soon as we get closer to the beacon. So here it comes. So probably within a couple of miles we should do it, I would say. We'll do it at 3 miles out. So heading mode, aeroplane's turning right. So we need to come off the throttle now as well. Yeah, we can't go below 50% throttle because it will set off a klaxon about us not having the gear down. Well, we kind of can actually though. So if we look down here, there's a button. We can silence that undercarriage warning. So you can see the speed is falling off. So let's go and set our altitude for what we wanted, which was 9,500. And then go to indicated airspeed mode and see what happens. So what it's going to do, hopefully, is start descending to get to 9,500 feet. And if we wanted to go more steeply, we can just use the spoilers to make that happen. There you go, look. So if I extend the spoilers, that's exactly what happens. If I release the spoilers, the nose comes back up. It's good, isn't it? I'm not convinced it's using the indexer though on the indicated airspeed. I think it's just at whatever point you engage it, it uses the speed you're at the time. Warning. So what we're looking for is to be 25 miles away from that VOR station, which we can use the distance measuring equipment to measure. Yeah, we can also turn this course. So we wanted 331, didn't we? So if we turn the course to 331, we'll know if we're on the track or not. So we're slightly off to the right of the track. So we can adjust that just by moving the heading around. So I put ourselves on a slight course. We could even go for beam mode. So now we're on beam mode. We can get the course ready for the next turn. So we know we want to be flying 259 degrees. So if we were to move this to 259, which was going to be about there, see that down there? And we can also get nav2 ready to use it for the approach maybe. So again, that will be 259 degrees. And we'll also get nav2 ready with the localiser. So we want... Ah, interesting. So let's just have a look at that. Runways. Yeah, it hasn't actually got a localiser. Sorry, I misread the map. So we can just that's just giving you your information you need to know. It's going to be a visual approach anyway. So if we remember, we're looking for 25 miles, so we're about 4 miles until we make the turn, giving ourselves time to turn basically. So when we get to about sort of 23, 24 miles, we'll hit the heading button. How are we doing on altitude? We need to descend a bit more quickly, don't we? So I'm putting the spoilers out to help us get that back down. skimming through 11,000 feet. Coming up to 22 miles out, so a couple of miles before the turn. So let's go for heading mode anytime soon, I guess. Let's try it. So I'm going to also turn off so we're making the left turn to the runway direction. It's going to be worth having a look at the wind. So we've got a wind coming from the southwest, which is going to push us further away, so we want to turn into that slightly on the heading. So the runway's down here. So let's come off the autopilot now, fly this in by hand. So we're looking to stabilise the airspeed. Let's press F. And let's move our view down a bit so we can see things. So we'll now move the course over to nav2, and you can see that's got the runway direction now, on the course marker at least. Obviously the CDI is not going to reflect anything. So we're just looking to manage airspeed now. So we're going to extend the spoilers again. We'll need to lose some airspeed before we can bring the flaps down. So visual approach. Luckily it's nice and clear.
Flaps 11.
Flaps 11.
25 then. Gear down.
Gear down.
Flaps 25.
Whoops. Wrong lever there. Flaps 25.
Flaps 42.
Terrain ahead.
So I'm going to just hold us at this altitude for a while. There's a hill in the way, as you can see on the approach. I'm just looking at the vertical airspeed there. Getting a bit slow as well, so I'm keeping an eye on the indicated airspeed. Ideally we want to stay about 130 knots if we can. Let's have a zoom in just for a satisfy our own. Now, are we off to the left? Right, sorry. We are, aren't we? It's only a very short airfield. Okay.
100 feet to minimum.
Okay, we're too slow. No, we are off to the... Where the hell's the runway gone? Okay, my bad. So what we're going to do, this is a good example actually of becoming lost along the way. So we're going to climb out and come back round. This is a real problem with lower resolution screens with Flight Simulator, is you can't always make things out in the distance, especially on a visual approach. So there's the airfield. So what we're doing is opening the engines up.
Speed. 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 Speed.
So we're just doubling back on ourselves. You see what we're doing here, look. Give ourselves a better chance. So we've raised the flaps, increased the throttle, and then we've got some speed back. We've not gone outside of undercarriage range though on the airspeed. Been quite careful about that. Okay, so turn back again.
Banking, banking. Banking, banking.
The airplane doesn't like us throwing it around, does it?
Banking.
There's the runway, directly in front of us. So we're looking to stabilise the speed. Flaps are down, gear is down, throttle is good. Speed. And there we go. Flaps can come up. Whew, that was a bit of an adventure, wasn't it? So there you go, the perils of trying to get into a smaller airfield when you can't see it easily. There's no guidance in terms of instrumentation to help you in easily. And we misidentified it. If we had in a way it was a good example, if we had bad visibility, it was a combination of me not following where we were properly, not identifying it visually, and we went in for the approach before we could see it, and obviously we hadn't seen it. Now they're playing music in the cabin. Oh my word. So yeah, it was an interesting one. You got to see, you know, typical tactic for a visual approach with a missed approach. Obviously, if you had a controller, they would have probably forced me to climb out to quite some height and do a much bigger circuit following vectors. But it just give you a good idea, you know, of the kind of pattern you can follow there if you misidentify the landing area, or if you're distracted, as I typically am, with lots of other things going on at the same time. As I always say, I leave these things in. I always leave these things in. If you see a perfect flight, you don't see how you get around doing things. I think this airfield's a bit small for this aeroplane, isn't it? Yeah, we're going to have to avoid... Oh, the wingtip missed by a foot there. Let's pull the aeroplane in here next to the parking area. Hope they got some big tie downs. Okay, parking brake on. So in the real world, obviously, you'd be switching the APU back on at this point to give yourself some power. So you'd be putting APU on, waiting 10 seconds, start a switch, waiting for the APU to come up to speed. Here it comes, and then you go and put the generator on. Then you can shut the engines down and it'll cross feed back. We'll go that far with it just to show you that. Let's turn some lights off while we're here. So landing lights can come off. The taxi light can come off now. The anti-collision lights, actually they should still be on while the engines are running. The strobe light can come off. Control 8, Control 9 even will take us further overhead. So yeah, APU is up and running, so we can turn the generator on for the APU. But that also means we can then go and kill the engines, so we can pull back the... So crossfeed has happened back to the APU. So it's fairly straightforward, you know, from here on. You're just switching everything off that we turned on earlier. So the transponder can come off. I'm trying to remember what we did turn on. Turn off the master radio switches. Obviously there'll be lots of communication normally happening that we're not seeing here with air traffic control, also with ground. The boost pumps can come off now. I believe in this aircraft, if we go out into the cabin, we can control the music system. Yeah, here it is, look. Music. Hurrah! So, by the same token, we can open the door. It's very cool, isn't it? The music's come back on. Who turned it back on? Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. This is the F28 in Flight Simulator, and we saw, you know, some good bits in that video and some very poor bits like my recognition of the airfield. But you also saw, you know, some interesting stuff there about doing a quick turnaround and coming back in again properly. Right, I'll see you again soon. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Take care.